listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Frederick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, welcome to Proof Text. I am Michael Halcomb. I am here with J. M. Smith, and I'm excited to get into this episode of 10 Questions. Really love doing these episodes, and it's just such a joy for me. So, JM, you doing all right?
Great, brother. How's it?
Yeah, how's it? It's
Picking
good.
it up.
So,
I'm picking up the lingo.
there you go. You might find somebody. So in Hawaii, we do get bruh. You know, that's a very, very common one. If you're very local, and I don't ever say it because I sound so cringe if I try to say it, but they, instead of saying brother, right, they say rada.
Rada.
So, how's it, brada? You know, I probably just butchered that, but they sound way cooler when they say it here. I can get away with how's it, brada? Yeah, so it's good. Things are all right. So we're gonna jump in. This is 10 questions. We each get 5, and we're not really trying to do the answer thing. We've purposefully tried to block ourselves from giving answers. Although in one of the recent episodes, I was asking a question and answered it right there in the middle of the asking of the question. So
yeah, sometimes we
that happens.
stumble on the answer accidentally.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's always enlightening when that happens, though. Yeah. So let's jump into it. And Jam doesn't know what's coming, but here it is. We are in Galatians 5, verse 23. The NIV says this: gentleness and self-control. Against such things there is no law. I just have to laugh at this. It cracks me up. Because somebody could cite this and publish it or print it on something and think nothing of it. But when you actually stop to look at the text, you notice some things. So my first question to start us off is about punctuation then. In the NIV, we have a period after self-control and a period after law. In the Greek, we actually have a comma after praeutes and a raised dot after enkratia and a period after nomos. So we have a discrepancy in punctuation between the English and the Greek. We have 3 punctuation marks in the Greek, which, of course, those are modern Greek things that wouldn't have been there early on. Certainly in the original, if we were to ever find that, they wouldn't be there. But why the punctuation discrepancy?
This is not a question, so this doesn't count. This is an actual question to you about Greek, which is, remind me, the raised dot, is that the English equivalent of a semicolon or a colon, or?
It's both. It can be both.
Okay, yeah. So it's like a longer pause than a comma, but it's not a full period.
Right. You're getting kind of a little bit of a break there, for sure.
Okay.
Right.
All right. 23 years since I've had Greek, folks. So
hey, you remember?
Gotta shake the rust off sometimes.
Shake it off.
All right. So my question then is, first I want to know the word. My question is the word itself. Prautes.
Prautes.
Oh, so those little umlaut that I'm seeing on my Greek means to pronounce this not as a diphthong, but each vowel independently. What is that? Why is that word translated in the King James as meekness and in the NIV as gentleness? The New King James translates it as gentleness. So the New King James actually followed the NIV lead. So what's the difference between meekness and gentleness? Because those have two slightly different connotations in English. And like a mouse is meek, but an orangutan is gentle. If that makes sense. Like those are two
Yeah.
different things. So which is prautes? Which of those two connotations does it have?
Nice. Yeah. So my second question would be, how does this connect with what precedes it, and perhaps with what follows it, but especially with what precedes it, especially in verse 22? I think you can even take it back to verse all the way to verse 19, because this seems to be this contrast. But that's the question: how does it connect with what precedes it?
I want to know if Paul is he saying this with a wink in his eye? In other words, is that last phrase, against such things there is no law, is he really conveying information to them, or is he being sarcastic? Is not the right word. The
Captain
word
Obvious.
is this like, is this a classic, like we would say, British understatement? Like in modern British, how they will understate things and they're really, meaning to draw attention to it. Is that close to what's going on in the Greek text? And should we read it as like kind of a chuckle as he says it?
Yeah. A question I have is, if we tie this in, especially with the preceding verse where Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit. By the way, it's not in the plural, is it? It's in the singular. So all this seems to be one fruit. So that it's not like, hey, I get the fruit of love, I get the fruit of joy, but like these are all expected of every believer. So is this list? Because it is a list. We have agape, chara, irene, macrothumia, christotes, agathosune, pistis, prautes, inkratia. There's two parts to this. How are these connected, or are they connected? That's the first part of it. And the second, are these in an ascending type of list? Like, is it building to something, or is it more like a I don't know, I'm kind of thinking like a wheel, but yeah. How are these connected? So next bit of that.
All right. What am I on? Question 3. I want to go back to the same question I asked the one prior, first question. Inkratia.
There you go.
We're getting there. So is that word, again, how it's translated in different English translations? Sometimes self-control, most of them self-control. Old King James translates as temperance, which I immediately think of the temperance movement, like not
Right.
drinking alcohol and stuff like that. So what does this have to do with food or drink necessarily or primarily? Or does it have to do with, I'm just kind of looking at the lexical information. Is it just a more general sense? Like just controlling yourself, controlling your anger, or controlling your appetite? Or is it general, just controlling both?
Very good. That's an excellent question. I guess my fourth question would be, you talked earlier about, is he saying this with a wink, but the word nomos, law. we're in Galatians, obviously. So how does this pick up on the concept of Torah and or just law in general, like the law of human nature? And then what about like local Roman law? So is law like polyvalent or here or multi-tiered here, like operating on many levels, perhaps even a sort of humorous level? But is it reaching out to different venues of law? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, because it kind of goes along the lines of my question. Similarly, is Paul using this almost as a wordplay for his own discussion of law elsewhere? I mean, law is the dominant discussion in Galatians, or one of the most dominant discussions. So is Paul making a pun? I would take your question a little further and ask it that way. Is he making a pun on his own theme of the letter as we're nearing the end of the letter?
Yeah. Okay. Against such things there is no law. Later, I do know that in Galatians 6, right, he talks about the law of Christ. So I get really frustrated when
two verses
Christians,
after this, he is the law of Christ.
Oh, it's after this.
Two verses later. 6:2.
6:2. So yeah, he says like he mentions the law of Christ. And I get really frustrated when I hear Christians talk about, oh, we're not under the law anymore. We're not under the law. And I know most of them are probably meaning the law of Moses, but regardless, I do think there is perhaps some sense in which we're still under the law of Moses. But even if you forget that for a second, we are, as believers, under the law of Christ. Paul spells it out clearly. We are under a law. It may not be the law you're thinking of, but Jesus himself said he didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And then Paul says we're under the law of Christ. So as I'm thinking about we're under the law of Christ, and we pair it with this is a weird question. I'm trying to like think of how to word it live here. But is the law of Christ then a law of non-laws? I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but right, if there is no law against what he calls the fruit of the Spirit here, right? Love, joy, peace, faith, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, allegiance. If there's no law against those things, and these constitute the law of Christ, like laws are against things. Like that's why we have them. They are, you can't do this, right? So is the law of Christ a law of non-laws? Maybe you have a better way to word that. I don't know, but that's
I have a way that jumps into my mind because I think I know what you're saying, or at least I'm resonating with it. As a martial arts nerd, I grew up reading and studying Bruce Lee because he was a philosopher as well as martial artist. And in his book, Tao Jeet Kune Do, he talked about his whole thing was you learn all these forms, and in old martial arts, you would learn forms. You would learn like precision movements. And his whole thing that revolutionized martial arts, at least for a lot of people, was forget the form. Like have what he called no form with a dash between it, no form. And he said in Tao Jeet Kune Do, that's not having no form, it's having the form of no form. In other words, it's like jazz. Jazz musicians, they forget the rules, but they don't forget the rules before they've learned the rules. So they've gotten to be able to improvise, but they've only gotten that way because they were so steeped in the rules of playing scales and music. So those are two different venues, but saying kind of the same thing. At least I think what you're saying is not having no law. It's having a law of no law. In other words, the law brings us to a point where we don't live by law, because what the prophet said in the Old Testament, I will put my law within them and write it on their hearts. It will not be like the law that I gave their ancestors when I brought them out of Egypt. Jeremiah 31, Ezekiel 36, both talk about this concept. It won't be like the law I brought, but yet paradoxically, they will live according to my law without living under the law. And it's paradoxical. So it's hard to put into words what you're saying, but those are the kind of thoughts that I have. And I think that is, I've always thought that is what the Christian life of walking in the Spirit is, that the law of
there's
no
an
law.
automaticity, right? An automaticity to it. So when I was teaching a couple weeks ago in my Bible interp class, it's just Bible interp 1 essentially, right? And you may or may not agree with this if you're watching or listening, but I'll throw it out there anyway. I am stridently against the idea of application. Like I just cringe at the idea that we should ever apply Bible or apply Scripture. That's a long conversation to discuss why I believe that. I hope to write a book on that at some point. But in short, I was telling them, like, when we say we need to apply Scripture, we're making the step, first of all, to making Scripture individualized and self-focused, and self as the center. Really, what should happen is that we get the story so deep down in us that it just lives there and like oozes out our pores, and like it's so deep there, like we don't have to think about it. We don't have to try to apply it. When we live, we just live in step with it. When we speak, that's just it's shaped by that. That's what comes out when we think and we see and we act. It's all just Scripture shaped. We're not trying to apply. It's just there, and that's how it comes out of who we are, because the story is so deep in us and embedded in us and shaped us so deeply that it's automatic now. We can't help but live and move and have our being that way. And so it becomes less about applying Scripture and more about getting the story deep down in us so that we're shaped by it. And I think it's the same with this, that we have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness so deep down in us, we don't have to stop and think, how do I apply love to this situation? How do I apply love today? Like, how do I apply this verse? How do I apply joy? No, like it's so deep down in us that we just live that out without even thinking about it or trying. It's a law of no law, if that makes sense. That's kind of my own thinking on it. Your point that is, it's very abstract and hard to put into words. The Bruce Lee analogy is a good one too. I had a student, and we were talking about I'm sure you know James Taylor, the musician, yeah. The song "Sweet Caroline." You know this. Sweet Caroline.
Neil Diamond. I know Neil Diamond version. I didn't know
is it
James
Neil Diamond? I think James Taylor sings it too, but I don't know.
I know the Neil Diamond version.
You know the song I'm talking about, regardless of who the author is.
Right.
You're at a wedding reception. That's the song they always play.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to come on.
You hear this song come on, and you hear the line, "Sweet Caroline," and then what's everybody do next?
Yep.
Everybody does it, right? Nobody knows any of the other words of the song probably, but they know that part. And it's like so ingrained in everybody that it's just automatic. And that's how I think we should engage Scripture, right? That that song is so deep down in us, we don't think about it until we go to a wedding reception or it accidentally comes on the radio in a car, right? Like, and then boom, bop, 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 we're doing it automatic.
Yeah.
And I think with these virtues that are listed, this fruit of the Spirit, it should just be lurking and sitting so deep in us that, man, whenever we're faced with a given situation, like, we're just so shaped by this, informed by it, that we live it out. We don't have to stop and think and ask, how do I apply this today? Anyways, I kind of went on a rant there. Preached a little bit, I think.
10 questions and one rant.
10 questions and a sermonette. Yeah. I think that was my fifth question, though. You might have one left. I don't know.
Okay. My last question then would be, yeah. Let me. How many? How of the fruit that he lists? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Am I counting right? There are 9.
Yeah.
Agape. Yeah. I would expect, just reading this, I would expect 7 as a good Hebrew number of completion and a good list number. So the fact that there's 9 makes me want to know, does Paul have other lists of things that are 9 as representative, or does 9 have some significance, 9 things in Greco-Roman virtue lists or vice lists even? So that's my final question. Why is this not 7? Why is it 9? But there, some of them are very close to each other in terms of concepts. So yeah, I don't know. Why these 9? That's my final question.
Can I throw a bonus question out? I just went back looking at what you said, dude. He lists 15 fruit of the flesh, is what I call it. Fruit of the flesh. So that's interesting that those outnumber the fruit of the spirits. I would have thought that, just from a rhetorical standpoint, that he would have given the upper hand to fruit of the spirit. But maybe, is he making some point rhetorically by giving the fruit of the flesh more and the fruit of the spirit less? Yeah, like, is it a harder road, or this is harder to attain? I don't know. What's the point of that? Yeah, that's a good question about 9 as well. So, well, let's stop there. That's good stuff. Yeah, well, thanks everybody for watching, for tuning in, putting up with the rants, the additional questions.
Bruce Lee trivia. Neil Diamond trivia.
Is it Neil Diamond? I said James Taylor. I can't believe that. You're right. It is Neil Diamond. I had to Google it. I'm not a Neil Diamond fan, but
shocking! Really, somebody that loves Tupac and hip hop is not a Neil Diamond fan.
Oh, that song though, I can roll with that. Hey, did you know they found Tupac's shooter? Yeah. They indicted him over the weekend. Yeah,
I saw you post about it on Facebook. That's where I saw it first.
Yeah. Anyways, wildness, man. Yeah. So I just dedicated that recent Psalms remix book to him.
Yep.
So kind of funny. Anyways, we'll stop there. If you would like the episode and share it and subscribe to the podcast, and do the same for the Disciple Dojo podcast. You guys are up there, getting close to 10,000. That's impressive.
Our YouTube channel, and we're we'll have just done it after this releases, probably giving away a set of the Anchor Bible Dictionary as a celebration of hitting 10,000, and just as a thank you to those that have helped us grow the channel, all the subscribers. So yeah, we're gonna do something even bigger at 20,000. I'm still working on that, how we're gonna celebrate that milestone, but maybe it might involve some Glossa House swag. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, congrats on that, man. That's
Thanks,
great
brother.
getting to that. Um, makes our YouTube channel feel a little small, but good for you. Yeah, so head over to discipledojo.org and then also to glossahouse.com. Tons of great resources coming out, y'all, on glossahouse.com. You so affordably priced and good stuff. Well, we'll stop there. We'll see you next time. Until then, aloha.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.